Alright everybody, so this is part 2 of the obscure Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. So, if you haven't watched part 1, go ahead and watch it. I just want to let you know, I have no idea what's going on here. This is my first look at this iceberg. So, yeah. So let's get into it. And also, I'll try my best to pronounce shit, but I probably do pronounce it really wrong. So, yeah. Also, at time of recording, it's daytime, so now, I feel, extra safe, because last time it was night, so, we got that. So, we're starting off with the Lake Winnipesaukee, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, I'm so sorry, Mystery Stone. So, we got the Wikipedia page. Alright, so, the Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone is an alleged out-of-place artifact found in a town near Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. The stone's age, purpose, and origin are unknown. The stone is about 4 inches, 100 millimeters long, and 2.5 inches, 64 millimeters thick. Dark and egg-shaped, bearing a variety of carved symbols, including a face. Carvings on one side of the stone show an ear of corn and several other figures. The other side is more abstract, featuring inverted arrows, a moon shape, some dots, and a spiral. So there's this picture. So you can see, so the carving is actually pretty nice. So we got the face, and then so I can see the corn. I don't know what that is, but some nice carving there. The egg shape is very interesting. It looks kind of like a chocolate egg, but a hole goes through the stone from top to bottom, seemingly bored from both ends with different sized bits. 1/8 inch, 3.2 millimeters at the top, and 3/8 inch, 9.5 millimeters at the bottom. Also, I apologize for my voice. I'm kind of sick right now. But anyway, so the stone was reportedly found in 1872 in Meredith, New Hampshire by workers digging a hole for a fence post. Seneca Ladd, a Meredith businessman who hired the workers, was given credit for the discovery. In 1892, upon Ladd's death, the stone passed to Frances Ladd Co. of Center Harbor, one of his daughters. In 1927, she donated the stone to the New Hampshire Historical Society. The stone is currently on exhibit at the Museum of New Hampshire History. So this is the display. So we got the mirror too, so then we can see the back. So we can take a look, see. So we got the, alright. Okay. Oh shit. Okay, anyways. A contemporary source suggested that the stone commemorates a treaty between two tribes. Another writer later suggested that it is a thunderstone. With the somewhat limited understanding of the day, the letter said that thunderstones always present the appearance of having been machined or handworked. Frequently, they came from deep in the earth, embedded in lumps of clay, or even surrounded by solid rock or coral. In 1994, a borescope analysis of the stone's holes was performed. State archaeologist Richard Boisville later suggested that the holes had the appearance of having been drilled by power tools from the 19th or 20th century. I've seen a number of holes bored in stone with technology that you would associate with prehistoric North America. There's a certain amount of unevenness, and this hole was extremely regular throughout. What we did not see was variations that would be consistent with something that was several hundred years old. Scratches in the lower bore suggested that it was placed on a metal shaft and removed several times. Analysis has concluded that the stone is a type of quartzite. So that's interesting. I'm not sure what to think of this mystery stone, but it's always interesting to learn new things about stuff like this, because yeah. So let's take another look. See, monkey chains. Oh, this item is no longer available. Whoops. Well, I was actually kind of curious about monkey chains, but I guess we're not going to find out about that one today. Greek fire. This article is about the weapon. For the band, see Greek fire band. For other uses, see Greek fires. So it looks like this article is really fucking long. I'm not going to read all that. So, I'm going to read the little summary there. So, Greek fire was an incendiary weapon system used by the Byzantine Empire from the 7th to 14th centuries. The recipe for Greek fire was a closely guarded state secret. Historians have variously speculated that it was based on saltpeter, I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that one, sulfur or quicklime. But most modern scholars agree that it was based on petroleum mixed with resins, comparable in composition to modern napalm. Byzantine sailors would toss grenades loaded with Greek fire onto enemy ships or spray from tubes. Its ability to burn on water made it an effective and destructive naval incendiary weapon, and rival powers tried unsuccessfully to copy the material. So, here's a picture. The Roman fleet burned the opposite fleet down, an Eastern Roman/Byzantine warship using the secret weapon Greek fire against the ship belonging to the rebel Thomas the Slav. A.D. 827, 12th century illustration from the Madrid's Skylitzes. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one, I'm so sorry. So we got all the history. So let's really quickly take a look at, we're going to look at the theories on composition, effectiveness and countermeasures, and yeah. So we got to look at the theory on composition. The first and, for a long time, the most popular theory regarding the composition of Greek fire held that its chief ingredient was saltpeter, making an early form of gunpowder. This argument was based on the thunder and smoke description, as well as on the distance the flame could be projected from the siphon, which suggested an explosive discharge. From the times of Isaac Vossius, several scholars adhered to this position, most notably the so-called French school during the 19th century, which included chemist Marcelin Berthelot. I'm so sorry. This view has subsequently been rejected, since saltpeter does not appear to have been used in warfare in Europe or the Middle East before the 13th century, and is absent from the accounts of the Muslim writers, the foremost chemists of the early medieval world before the same period. In addition, the behavior of the suggested mixture would have been very different from the siphon projected substance described by the Byzantine sources. A second view, based on the fact that Greek fire was inextinguishable by water, some sources suggest that water intensified the flames, suggested that its destructive power was the result of an explosive reaction between water and quicklime. Although quicklime is known and used by the Byzantines and Arabs in warfare, this theory is refuted by literary and empirical evidence. A quicklime-based substance would have to come in contact with water to ignite, while Emperor Leo's Tactica indicates that Greek fire was often poured directly onto the decks of enemy ships, although admittedly decks were kept wet due to a lack of sealants. Likewise, Leo describes the use of grenades, which further reinforces the view that contact with water was not necessary for the substance's ignition. Zengelis, 1932, pointed out that based on experiments, the result of the water quicklime reaction would be negligible in the open sea. Another similar proposition suggested that Kallinikos had discovered calcium phosphide, which can be made by boiling bones and urine in a sealed vessel. On contact with water, releases phosphine, which ignites spontaneously. Extensive experiments with calcium phosphide also failed to reproduce the described intensity of Greek fire. Consequently, although the presence of either quicklime or saltpeter in the mixture cannot be entirely excluded, they were not the primary ingredient. Most scholars agree that Greek fire was based on either crude or refined petroleum, comparable to modern napalm. See that? The Byzantines had easy access to crude oil from the naturally occurring wells around the Black Sea. For example, the wells around I'm not gonna try, I'm so sorry. Noted by the Constantine, Golly, that's a long name. Or in various locations throughout the Middle East. An alternate name for Greek fire was Median fire, and the 6th century historian Procopius recorded that crude oil called naphtha in Greek by the Persians was known to the Greeks as Median oil. This seems to corroborate the ability of naphtha as a base ingredient of Greek fire. Naphtha was also used by the Abbasids in the 9th century with special troops who wore thick protective suits and used small copper vessels containing burning oil, which they threw onto the enemy troops. There was a surviving 9th century Latin text preserved in Wolfenbüttel in Germany, which mentions the ingredients of what appears to be Greek fire and the operation of the siphons used to project it. Although the text contains some inaccuracies, it identifies the main component as naphtha. Resins were probably added as a thickener. The Praecepta Militaria, referred to the substance as sticky fire, and to increase the duration and intensity of the flame, a modern theoretical concoction included the use of pine tar and animal fat. A 12th century treatise prepared by Mahdi bin Ali al-Tarsusi, I'm so sorry, for Saladin records an Arab version of Greek fire called naft, which also had a petroleum base with sulfur and various resins added. Any direct relation with the Byzantine formula isn't likely. An Italian recipe from the 16th century had been recorded for recreational use. It includes charcoal from a willow tree, saltpeter, saute al dente, alcohol, sulfur, indents, tar, pergola, wood, and camphor. The concoction was guaranteed to burn underwater and to be beautiful. So let's take a look at effectiveness and countermeasures. Although the destructiveness of Greek fire is indisputable, it did not make the Byzantine navy invincible. It was not, in the words of naval historian John Pure, a ship killer comparable to the naval ram, which by then had fallen out of use. While Greek fire remained a potent weapon, its limitations were significant when compared to more traditional forms of artillery. In its siphon-deployed version, it had limited range and could be used safely only in a calm sea with favorable wind conditions. The Muslim navies eventually adapted themselves to it by staying out of its effective range and devising methods of protection such as felt or hide soaked in vinegar. Ooh, so these are the grenades. Nevertheless, it was still a decisive weapon in many battles. John Julius Norwich wrote, "It is impossible to exaggerate the importance of Greek fire in Byzantine history." That's interesting. So, yeah, that's cool. Let's check out crawlers. Oh, whoops, my mouse is frozen. Hold on. Bear with me here. Terribly sorry. Alright, so what are crawlers? So we got r/crawler sightings. True stories and sightings of the pale, thin cryptid. Crawler is a commonly seen cryptid with pale skin, long limbs, and a tall, thin body. They are generally seen at around 8 feet tall or standing. There are stories of this creature all throughout America. It has even inspired modern culture such as Until Dawn's, I'm not going to say that word, I'm a bit scared about that, The Rake and Slenderman. So that's interesting. So we got, so we can check out, whoopsie daisies. Oh my god. Is that what I think it is? Or is that the one? Or is it two? That's interesting. It was captured on January 16th, 2025. Huh. That's interesting. Okay. That's something to be aware of when I'm in the forest. Bodily changes from UFO encounter. Denver woman experiences body changes after a UFO sighting. A Denver woman recalls her experience after a UFO sighting. After 2 months, the moles and spider veins on her body begin to disappear. Then, her dark hair rapidly turns blonde. I received the following account. My event took place on December 29th, 2021 at 6 p.m. in Denver, Colorado. In the 2.5 years following my event, I have had a host of very strange phenomena happen to me. I have been shy about talking about these things, from what I believe is a result of my interaction with this object. I read your book, Alien Disclosure, and thought that you might be able to answer some of my questions. The event started with me witnessing a bright yellow cylinder craft hovering above Interstate 70, just east of Denver. At the time, I felt sudden fear, but that feeling quickly changed to euphoria. I don't remember much after that, other than waking in my bed the next morning. About 2 months after my encounter/sighting, all of the moles, on my body began to fade and then completely disappear. To date, 5 moles have completely disappeared, and 9 more are in different states of fading. About 5 months after this event occurred, all the hair on my arms and legs began to change to light blonde en masse. I have had medium brown hair and am only 31 years old. Although I originally considered premature graying, I began to notice the individual hairs had changed color from the root upwards, and when the hair started to change, it took about 5 days for the complete hair change. The top of the hair fading from medium brown to reddish to blonde, so it was not as if it was growing out this color, and no amount of sun exposure has ever caused lightning like this on me before. Although the hairs that have changed colors have actually changed in consistency, they were originally a medium coarseness, and now they are a feather soft fine. About 2 months ago, the spider veins in my legs began to fade, and now one that I have had for about 7 years is completely gone, and another is fading rapidly. Since this has occurred, I've had dreams almost nightly of entities who talk to me and claim to be intelligent species from somewhere else, and they keep trying to give me strange information I don't understand. I woke up a few times and caught myself uttering some language that I've never heard before, but I've ruled out speaking in tongues because it seems this language seems to have structure and form. I also have feelings of hot and cold in different parts of my body. I get pulsating feelings on the bottom of my feet, up my legs, down my arms, and on the palms of my hands. Sometimes this pulsating becomes so intense it's painful. I've also felt this heat/pulsating feeling right below my eyes, between my eyes, and in the front of my brain. I am very upset and confused as to what is going on with me. Note: the experiencer told me later that she has consulted a physician and a few tests were conducted. None of the results point to any abnormalities or illnesses. Physicians cannot explain the loss of moles, spider veins, and rapid changes in hair color. The experience assures me that she will keep in contact with any updates. Lon. That's interesting. I've never heard of bodily changes following a UFO encounter, but I suppose we can't really rule it out as impossible. So we got the Hoyita mystery. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing this name wrong, yeah. MV Hoyita was an American merchant vessel from which 25 passengers and crew mysteriously disappeared in the South Pacific in October 1955. She was found adrift with no one aboard. The ship was in very poor condition, with corroded pipes and a radio which, while functional, had a range of only about 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers because of faulty wiring. However, the extreme buoyancy of the ship made sinking nearly impossible. Oh, hello, baby. Hello. Hi there. Investigators are puzzled as to why the crew had not remained on board and waited for help. So here's the image. So, let's take a look. So, MV Hoyita was a 69-foot, 21.0 meter wooden ship built in 1931 as a luxury yacht by the Wilmington Boat Works in Los Angeles for movie director Roland West, who named the ship for his wife, actress Jewel Carmen. Hoyita, in Spanish meaning Little Jewel. Hi, baby. Sorry, my kitty is here. In 1936, the ship was sold and registered to Milton E. Beacon. During this period, she made numerous trips south to Mexico and to the 1939-1940 Golden Gate International Exposition in San Francisco. During part of this time, Chester Mills was the captain of the vessel. The ship's hull was constructed of 2-inch, 51mm thick cedar on oak frames. She was 69 feet, 0 inches, 21.0 meters long, with a beam of 17 feet, 0 inches, 5.2 meters, and a draft of 7 feet, 6 inches, 2.3 meters. Her net tonnage was 47 tons, and her gross tonnage was approximately 70 tons. She had tanks for 2,500 U.S. gallons, 9,500 liters of water, and 3,000 U.S. gallons, 11,400 liters of diesel fuel. In October 1941, 2 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, Hoyita was acquired by the U.S. Navy and taken to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, where she was outfitted as a yard patrol boat, YP-108. The Navy used her to patrol the big island of Hawaii until the end of World War II. By 1943, she ran aground and was heavily damaged, but the Navy was badly in need of ships, so she was repaired. At this point, new pipework was made from galvanized iron instead of copper or brass. In 1946, the ship was surplus to Navy requirements and most of her equipment was removed. In 1948, Hoyita was sold to the firm of Lewis Brothers. At this point, cork lining was added to the ship's hull along with refrigeration equipment. The ship had 2 Gray Marine diesel engines providing 225 horsepower, 168, I forget what that stands for, and 2 extra diesel engines for generators. In 1950, William Tavares became the owner. However, he had little use for the vessel and sold it in 1952 to Dr. Catherine Luamala, a professor at the University of Hawaii. She chartered the boat to her friend, Captain Thomas H. Dusty Miller, a British-born sailor living in Samoa. Miller used the ship as a trading and fishing charter boat. About 5 a.m. on the 3rd of October 1955, Hoyita left Samoa's Apia harbor bound for the Tokelau Islands. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing any of this wrong. About 270 miles, 430 kilometers away. The boat had been scheduled to leave on the noon tide the previous day, but her departure was delayed because her port engine clutch failed. Hoyita eventually left Samoa on one engine. She was carrying 16 crew members and 9 passengers, including a government official, a Dr. Alfred Andy Dennis Parsons, a World War II surgeon on his way to perform an amputation, a Copal buyer, and 2 children. Her cargo consisted of medical supplies, timber, 80 empty 45-gallon 200-liter oil drums, and various foodstuffs. The voyage was expected to take between 41 and 48 hours. Hoida was scheduled to arrive at the Tokelau Islands on the 5th October. On the 5th October. On the 6th of October, a message from Fakelfo port reported that the ship was overdue. No ship or land-based operator was reported receiving a distress signal from the crew. A search and rescue mission was launched, and from the 6th to the 12th of October, Sunderlands of the Royal New Zealand Air Force covered a probability area of nearly 100,000 square miles, 260,000 kilometers squared, of ocean, but no sign of Hoida or any of her passengers or crew was found. 5 weeks later, on the 10th of November, Gerald Douglas, captain of the merchant ship Tuvalu, en route from Suva to Funafuti, sighted Hoida more than 600 miles, 970 kilometers west from a scheduled route, drifting north of Vanuatu. The ship was partially submerged and listing heavily. Her port deck rail was awash, and there was no trace of any of the passengers or crew. 4 tons of cargo were also missing. The recovery party noted that the radio was discovered tuned to 2,182 kHz. I should know this because I actually do radios, but the International Marine Radio Telephone Distress Channel. So barnacle growth high above the usual waterline on the port side showed that Hoida had been listing heavily for some time. There was some damage to the superstructure. Her flying bridge had been smashed away, and the deckhouse had light damage and broken windows. A canvas awning had been rigged on top of the deckhouse behind the bridge. Hoida carried a dinghy and 3 Golly life rafts, but all were missing. She did not carry enough life jackets for everyone on board. Ooh, there we go. That's... The starboard engine was found to be covered by mattresses, while the port engine's clutch was still partially disassembled, showing that the vessel was still running on only one engine. The starter motor of the starboard auxiliary engine was also missing. Hi, baby! Oh, why are you looking at me like that? Indicating that this engine was unserviceable. An auxiliary pump had been rigged in the engine room, mounted on a plank of wood slung between the main engines. However, it had not been connected. The radar on board was tuned to the International Distress Channel, but when the equipment was inspected, a break was found in the cable between the set and the aerial. The cable had been painted over, obscuring the break. This would have limited the range of the radio to about 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers. The electric clocks on board, wired to the vessel's generator, had stopped at 10:25, and the switches for the cabin lighting and navigation lights were on, implying that whatever had occurred happened at night. The ship's logbook, sextant, mechanical chronometer, and other navigational equipment, as well as the firearms Miller kept in the boat, were missing. A doctor's bag was found on deck, containing a stethoscope, a scalpel, and 4 lengths of blood-stained bandages. There was still fuel in Hoida's tanks. From the amount used, it was calculated that she made some 243 miles, 391 kilometers before the vessel was abandoned, probably within 50 miles, 80 kilometers of Tokelau. The leak had probably started after 9 p.m. on the second night of the voyage, with 9 hours of darkness ahead. Although Hoida was found with her bilges and lowly decks flooded, her hull was sound, and once the water was pumped from her hull, she floated on a stable and even keel, and was easily towed into harbor at Suva. When at her mooring there, investigators heard the sound of water entering the vessel. It was found that the pipe in the raw water circuit of the port auxiliary engine cooling system had failed due to galvanic corrosion, allowing the water into bilges. The first the crew would have known about the leak was when the water rose above the engine room floorboards, by which time it would have been nearly impossible to locate the leak. Also, the bilge pumps were not fitted with strainers, and had become clogged with debris, meaning that it would have been very difficult to pump the water out. A formal inquiry into the fate of Hoida was held on Apia in February 1956. It was found that the vessel was in a poor state of repair, but determined that the fate of the passengers and crew was inexplicable on the evidence submitted in the inquiry. An especially perplexing point was that the 3 life rafts Hoida carried were missing. But it would not make sense for the crew and passengers to voluntarily abandon the vessel. Fitted out for carrying refrigerated cargo, Hoida had 640 cubic feet 18 meters cubed of cork lining her holds, making her virtually unsinkable. In addition, further buoyancy was provided by a cargo of empty fuel drums. The inquiry was able to establish the only reasons for the vessel becoming flooded. It was found that the vessel would have begun to flood due to the fractured cooling pipe. The bilge pumps were unserviceable due to becoming blocked. Hoida lacked watertight bulkheads or subdivisions in the bilges. The water would have gradually flooded to the lower decks. As the boat began to sink lower into the water, the one remaining engine would not have been able to maintain enough speed to steer. Hoida then fell beam on to a heavy swell and took on the heavy list it was found with. While flooded to an extent which would sink a conventional vessel, Hoida stayed afloat due to a cork-lined hull and cargo of fuel drums. The inquiry also placed much of the responsibility for the events on Captain Miller. They found him reckless for setting out on an ocean-going voyage with only one engine and numerous minor faults, and negligent for failing to provide a working radio, a properly equipped lifeboat. He was also in breach of maritime law, since he had allowed Hoida's license to carry fairly-paying passengers to lapse. The inquiry made no mention of the used medical equipment found on board. Hoida is sometimes referred to as the Mary Celeste of the South Pacific, and has been the subject of several books and documentaries offering explanations that range from rational and conventional to supernatural and paranormal. Numerous hypotheses for the disappearance of Hoida's crew and passengers have been advanced. Many were circulated at the time of the event, and several others have been put forward since. Given the fact that the hull of Hoida was sound and her design made her almost unsinkable, a main concern of the investigators was determining why the passengers and crew did not stay on board if the event was simply triggered by flooding in the engine room. Injured captain hypothesis. Captain Miller should have been well aware of the vessel's ability to stay afloat, leading some to speculate that he had died or become incapacitated for some reason. Someone on board was injured, hence the blood-stained bandages. Without entirely sure the other people on board, they may have panicked when the Hoida began to flood and taken to the life rafts. However, this in itself would not account for the missing cargo and equipment, unless the vessel had been found abandoned and her cargo removed. A friend of Miller, Captain S.B. Brown, was convinced that Miller would never have left Hoida alive, given his knowledge of her construction. He was aware of the tension between Miller and his American first mate, Chuck Simpson, and felt that their mutual dislike came to blows and both men fell overboard or were severely injured in a struggle. This left the vessel without an experienced seaman, and would explain why those remaining on board were panicked when the ship began to flood. Japanese involvement. The Fiji Times and Herald quoted at the time from an impeccable source to the effect that Hoida had passed through a fleet of Japanese fishing boats during his trip and had observed something the Japanese did not want them to see. The Daily Telegraph in London hypothesized that some still active Japanese forces from World War II were to blame for the disappearances. Operating from an isolated island base, there was still strong anti-Japanese sentiment in part of the Pacific, and in Fiji there was specific resentment of Japan being allowed to operate fishing fleets in local waters. Such theories suddenly gained credence when men cleaning Hoida found knives stamped "Made in Japan." However, tests on the knives proved negative, and it turned the knives were old and broken, quite possibly left on board when the Hoida was used for fishing in the late 1940s. Also, there was a proposition that the vessel's occupants were kidnapped by a Soviet submarine, with the world at that time in the midst of the growing Cold War. Early reports that the Hoida had been involved in a collision led to speculation that she had been rammed, and that modern sea pirates attacked the vessel, killed the 25 passengers and crew, and cast their bodies into the ocean, and stole the missing 4 tons of cargo. It was also revealed that Miller had amassed large debts after a series of unsuccessful fishing trips on Hoida. However, it would have been difficult to see the events surrounding Hoida as insurance fraud, given that no seacocks were found open and the ship would be almost impossible to scuttle. Also, Miller was relying on Hoida being chartered for regular runs between Samoa and Tokelau. These government charters would have quickly cleared his debts. A subsequent owner of Hoida, British author Robin Moham, spent many years investigating the vessel's past, and published his findings as the Hoida Mystery in 1962. Moham agreed that the events were started by the flooding of the broken coal pipe and failure of the pumps. The mattresses found covering the starboard engine were used either as an attempt to stem the leak or to protect the electrical switchboard from being spray-kicked up by the engine's flywheel as the water level rose. At the same time, Hoida encountered increasingly heavy swells and squally weather. Captain Miller, knowing the Hoida to be unsinkable and desperate to reach his destination to clear his debt, pressed on. However, Simpson and possibly other crew members demanded that he turn back. This effectively led to mutiny, and Miller and the crew struggled, during which Miller sustained a serious injury. By now, the ship was entering heavy weather, with winds around 40 miles per hour, 64 kilometers an hour, and with one engine and a flooded bilge, was beginning to labor. The flooding in the engine room would have eventually caused the starboard engine to fail, also cutting all the vessel's electrical power. Simpson was now in control and made the decision to abandon the ship, taking the navigational equipment, logbook, and supplies, as well as the injured Miller with them. It still seems unlikely that Simpson would choose to abandon the flooded but floating ship to take to a small open raft in the Pacific Ocean. Malm proposed that they sighted a nearby island or reef and tried to reach it, but in the strong winds and seas, the rafts were carried out to sea, leaving Hoyida drifting and empty. The damage to the lightly built superstructure was caused by wave damage while the vessel was drifting in heavy seas. In July 1956, the Hoyida was auctioned off by her owners for £2,425 to a Fiji islander, David Simpson, no relation to Chuck Simpson. He refitted and overhauled her, and she went to sea again that year. However, she was surrounded by legal disputes over the transfer of her registry from the United States to Britain without permission. In January 1957, she ran aground while carrying 13 passengers from the Coral Sea. She was repaired, and in October 1958 began a regular trade between Levuka and Suva. Hoyida again ran aground on a reef in November 1959 at Vatverlu near Levuka. She floated off the reef assisted by high tide, but while heading for port began to take in water through a split seam. The pumps were started, but it became clear that the rafts for the pump had been installed the wrong way around, meaning that water was pumped into the hull, not out. Now, with the reputation as an unlucky ship and with a damaged hull, she was abandoned by her owners and beached. She was stripped of useful equipment and was practically a hulk when she was brought in by Malm. He sold the hulk in 1966 to Major L. Castellane Cottle, who ran a tourist and publicity bureau at Levuka. The Major planned to turn it into a museum and tea room, but the plan never saw daylight. The hulk disappeared piece by piece, and the process of disintegration appears to have been complete by the late 1970s. On the 14th of March 1975, the Western Samoa Post Office released a set of 5 stamps dealing with the mystery of Hoyida. In 2009, a walkway was named after Dr. Alphys Dennis Parsons near his former Tola Bay home in Auckland, New Zealand. In 2012, 2 memory stones in honor of the event were erected in Apia, Samoa, and in Whakaupu Village, Tokelau. As of 2012, all aboard were still declared as missing. In 2012, there was a call for a formal declaration that they were dead. So, we have everybody here. Got the crew and the passengers, and that's it. That's actually really weird. Not sure what happened there. I don't think anybody is. But, well, that's interesting. The Bishop Birds of Salisbury Cathedral. What is that? So this is Edith Oliver. Edith Oliver, 1872 to 1948, was by any definition a pillar of the local community, particularly in Wilton, where she spent most of her life. During her lifetime, she knew everyone of interest in the area, but had contacts and friendships that went far beyond the locality. She was a writer of both novels and nonfiction, a well-read bluestocking, a committed Christian, and a very public-spirited person who gave much of her time to public service. She helped found the Wiltshire Women's Land Army during the First World War, despite being opposed to women's suffrage in her earlier years. She became involved with local politics, becoming the first woman councillor on Wilton Borough Council in 1934. She was mayor of Wilton from 1938 to 1941, when, amongst other things, she helped organize a resettlement of refugees. She never married. Her life changed forever in 1925, when she was in her early 50s, after her father and close sister's death. She is remembered as an inspirational hostess to a circle of famous writers, artists, and composers, known as the Bright Young Things, or the Bright Young People. Despite their great age difference, she became a very close friend of the artist Rex Whistler, 1905 to 1944. Oh, whoopsie daisies. I accidentally dropped my notebook. Okay. Edith was born at Wilton Rectory on the 31st of December, 1872. Ooh, we share the same birthday. She was the daughter of Dacus Olivier, rector of the New Italianate Church in Wilton, and private chaplain to the Earl of Pembroke, and Emma Selina Eden, who was daughter of Robert Eden, Bishop of Moray and Ross. Emma was Dacus's second wife. Edith was the 8th of 10 children. Mildred, or Millie, was born 3 years later and became Edith's closest sibling and best friend. The Olivier family were of Huguenot descent, and Edith's second cousin was the actor Sir Lawrence Oliver. Edith grew up in the environs of Wilton House and estate. As children, Edith, Mildred, and the younger boys would often play with Lord Pembroke's nieces and nephews. While she was growing up, she spent time socializing with the Pembroke family and encountered their visitors, including politicians, aristocrats, intellectuals, and members of the literary establishment. As Anna Thomason says in her book, it gave her a sense of superiority, both socially and intellectually, that never left her. She was described as rather eccentric, but also having huge energy, intelligence, confidence, imagination, and strong opinions. Her early life and upbringing provided her with important connections. Edith received schooling at home from her mother and was subsequently a governess. She won a scholarship to St. Hugh's College, Oxford, where Charlotte Annie Moberly was principal. In 1895, at the age of 22 years, to read history, but was only completed 4 terms due to ill health, asthma. Whilst at Oxford, she developed a friendship with Charles Dodson, the writer Lewis Carroll, who was still resident at Christ Church, but was no longer teaching. She had a fleeting romance with a Don at Oxford, but her father felt this man was not good enough for his daughter. So we got, and the Italian at church. Very pretty. In 1908, Edith's mother died, and Mildred and Edith took on the running of the rectory. In 1912, Dacres retired, was made a canon of Salisbury Cathedral, and they moved into the cathedral close to No 20 North Walk. Her life was dominated by her father and his care. He had also been described as being both autocratic and conservative. During the war, Edith was a member of the Wiltshire Agricultural Committee and helped to found the Wiltshire branch of Women's Land Army, recruiting volunteers and training them on local estates. A register of 4,000 women was soon built up. In 1920, she was awarded the MBE for her work. After Dacre's death in 1919, Edith and Mildred, now in their late 40s, moved to the Fitz House in Tefont Magna. In 1921, they moved to the old dairy cottage renamed the Day House, and set in the grounds of Wilton Park, hidden away behind the walls of the park. This was at request of their childhood friend, Reginald, Lord Pembroke. Edith was to spend the rest of her life living in this house. In 1924, Mildred, her sister and close friend, died of breast cancer. Edith, at age 51, feared that her life was over. After Mildred's death, Edith spent some time in Anglican convent, but the Mother Superior described her as too rebellious of mind for a life of prayer and contemplation. Still grieving for Mildred, in 1925, Edith was invited to stay in San Remo, Italy. This proved to be a turning point for her. At the age of 52 years old, it was during this time she really got to know Rex Whistler, who at the time was a 19-year-old student in the Slade School of Art. Edith immediately hit off with Rex, and they became close friends. In fact, it has been described as a romantic friendship. During this stay, Rex and Stephen decided that Edith should have an image makeover. She changed her hairstyle to a bangle and a bob, and acquired a new wardrobe. But the most fundamental change was her relationship with a much younger Rex and the widening of her social circle. Rex Whistler and Stephen Tennant were part of the Bright Young Things, a group of aristocrats, socialites, and bohemians. This was during the interwar years and Roaring Twenties. It could be seen as a young, privileged group of people rebelling against their Victorian parents and indulging in a hedonistic lifestyle, throwing theatrical fancy dress pageants and weekend country house parties. This circle included some very notable names, such as Cecil Beaton, whose photographs promoted the public image of the group, the poet Siegfried Sassoon, the socialite Stephen Tennant, and the writer Osbert Sitwell, and the composer William Walton. Edith became their hostess, confidant, and muse. For example, she was instrumental in encouraging Cecil Beaton, the famous photographer, to move to Wiltshire. Edith introduced Rex to a world with the aristocratic connections and the Arcadian beauty and peace of Wilton Park. Sir Philip Sidney wrote Arcadia and Wilton in 1578, and the legend goes that he was inspired by the park's beauty and peace. Arcadia, the rural retreat and earthly paradise with its trees and rivers, would become a key theme. Edith encouraged Rex's art, and he inspired her writing. Rex and Edith shared a romantic imagination, and theirs was a meeting of minds. Rex had no interest in modern abstraction, but was drawn to a much earlier Georgian style of art. In 1926, Edith wrote The Love Child, her first and most successful novel, which was about a woman who was haunted by an imaginary child. Oh. Edith was fascinated by history and spirit of the landscape. She believed that darker, more primitive elemental energies resided within the Wiltshire landscape and Salisbury Plain. Edith recounts some of her supernatural experiences in her autobiography Without Knowing Mr. Walkley, named after the Times drama critic. In her youth, she had a strong desire to become an actress. In Chapter 16, Revenants of the Plain, in October 1916, during the First World War, she describes how she was driving between Devizes and Swindon whilst overseeing the Wiltshire Women's Land Army. She left the main road and soon encountered a very strange avenue. I was passing through a succession of huge grey megaliths, which stood on either hand, looming like vast immovable shadows, with a curtain of softly falling rain. She realized that she was approaching the Avebury, the megalithic site and one of the largest stone circles in the world. She reached the center and climbed the earthwork. Edith noticed a village fair in progress and spent a short while watching it before turning to her car due to the heavy rain. 9 years later, she revisited Avebury with her friend. They came across a guidebook in a local inn where they read that an animal fair had been held in Avebury but had been abolished in 1850. She was convinced she had seen a ghost fair. The following year, at a lawn society meeting in Avebury, she discovered that the avenue of megaliths by which she approached the village had disappeared before 1800. Oh. She compared her experience to that of Miss Annie Moberly and her friend and fellow academic Miss Eleanor Jordan, which was described in a book, An Adventure, 1911, for which Edith wrote an introduction. In Chapter 17, Things Past Explaining, Edith describes her own experience with the Bishop's Bird legend, also described by Annie Moberly. Annie's father, the Bishop of Salisbury, died in 1885. Within an hour or two, she saw 2 dazzling white birds, with large wingspans, flying up from the ground and over the cathedral. On the 16th of August 1911, Edith was on an outing with the Wilton choir boys to Wardour Castle. On the return journey, she saw 2 large white birds with their wings so brilliantly bright that even their shadowed underside shone like water reflecting light, flying up over the herd-cut meadows. Upon arrival in Wilton, she discovered that Bishop Wordsworth had only just suddenly and unexpectedly died. Edith describes the same chapter as several other strange happenings, including several visions of the fabled kingdom of Lyonesse while on visits to Land's End. Wow. Tragically, Rex was killed by mortar in 1944 whilst fighting in Normandy. Edith was devastated. She spent her final years planning a book about Rex, which was never completed. She did write one final book about her beloved Wiltshire, which was published posthumously. Edith died at home in the Day House on the 10th of May 1948 after having 3 strokes. Her funeral was held on the 14th of May at the Parish Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Nicholas. She is buried close to her parents and sister Mildred. Her monument is a simple wooden cross, now sadly quite badly decayed, and her coffin was lowered into the ground. As her coffin was lowered into the ground, there was a swish of wings as a pigeon took off into the sky, and David Herbert and Cecil Beaton commented, "Edith soaring through tracks unknown." Legacy. Edith's life is recorded in her nightly journals, which she wrote daily for over 60 years, with very few gaps. Her extensive journals and letters held at the Wiltshire and Swindon History Centre provide a fascinating record, particularly of the life between the First and Second World Wars, and a war that has long since disappeared. Wow. That's actually really interesting. Well, I'm gonna stop for now because this is like 40 minutes long now. So we're gonna continue later, but, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye!